Does mindfulness have any place in the workplace? Hi, my name is Ted Meissner, and welcome to Mindfulness Voyage. And I'm really excited about today's episode because research shows that mindfulness can be very helpful in the workplace. And one reason I'm excited about this is just this morning was a quarterly gathering of a community that I host of mindfulness teachers who bring mindfulness into workplaces, because it is a unique and very helpful part of improving our mental health and well-being in the world. So please do make a note to hit that subscribe button if you find this interesting, and let's get started. Our guest today is Vainre. Maris, welcome to the podcast. Very glad to have you here. Thank you so much for your time today.
Hi, and thank you for inviting me.
So before we get started with the research that you've been doing, I'm wondering if you could say just a little bit about where you are and what is the work that you're doing within mindfulness and what is that touching upon?
So I've relatively recently finished my PhD, and now I'm working as a grown-up researcher at the University of Tartu in Estonia, which is Northern Europe, small country, small university. And right now I'm actually not doing mindfulness research as such. I'm interested in well-being and how to improve well-being. And mindfulness is one way of doing that. And that was something I focused on during my PhD studies at the University of Cambridge. So I've kind of expanded from mindfulness, but I'm still writing papers on mindfulness. So it's kind of a parallel work stream, I guess.
Yeah. And thank you for explaining that, because it's such an important aspect to this, is that mindfulness is one of many aspects of promoting well-being and mental health and all the rest of that. So it's not just mindfulness for all. That's not what the research says either. So
No, no.
let's talk a little bit about this research paper that you've recently published, and tell us what this was about. Mindfulness and work performance?
Yes, indeed. So during my PhD, I was very interested in understanding whether mindfulness could improve work performance because, well, anecdotally at least, it seemed to be used for that purpose. And a lot of companies and well, also the University of Cambridge would kind of procure a mindfulness program to then offer to their employees. And it's not always with the intention to improve work performance. It's usually, with intention to improve well-being. But down the line, of course, they would be interested in seeing better results, or at least fewer services being used, so you don't have to pay for healthcare in the US, for example, as much, or health services at universities and so on. So anyway, I was interested in whether mindfulness could actually improve work performance. And so I started to prepare a trial to do that. And while doing that, I realized there is actually too little information out there for me to do a good trial. And part of the reason was that the field is not very well organized. And there are many reasons for that. So work performance can mean very different things. If I'm a researcher, work performance could be the number of papers I published, the number of podcasts I do, the number of, I don't know, PhD students I have and who graduates. Or it could be, to what extent do I help people, work out their code or, bugs in code or whatever. And all of these things are different aspects of one job, right? And then imagine the vast variety of jobs people do and the companies that exist. And so it makes sense that, in healthcare, you have one type of work performance or whatever that means. And in school, it might be something else for teachers and so on. So what I saw was a chaos, and I was interested in the broad picture. So like, if it's not an IT company that, it could be an IT company, sorry, it could be an IT company that wants to have mindfulness for their employees, but it could be something else entirely. And so, like, so what should they do, and what's the evidence? So then I felt like, yeah, we need an overview of the field, and we need to understand what work performance, how is work performance captured in mindfulness research, and what do we know about the results, so that future trialists, future me, if I wanted to continue in this field, would know how to power their randomized control trials, because that was really hard. And it was especially hard to power a study where you compare mindfulness against something else that could also improve well-being or work performance. So this is how the systematic review and meta-analysis that we are here for got started. My frustration of not knowing what to do.
And you're not alone in that. There are so many important aspects to research that you're bringing up, particularly around mindfulness. One is that our definition or meaning of mindfulness is not consistent across
No.
all different kinds of research. What do we really mean by that? And understanding as it being a human capacity, it's not like the measurement of a falling object in a vacuum. It's not quite that simple. It's more complex than that.
Yeah.
And you're also bringing up it's not just about mindfulness itself and performance. It's what are the outcomes? How does that influence performance? And what do we mean by performance? Because each role is unique. And I'm very curious about it. If you have any thoughts around, and maybe this is skipping ahead, is the idea of having a standardized program, lift and drop. We bring MBSR or something and expect it to solve all problems for workplace performance. My impression is that doesn't work so well, but I'm curious what you found in your research.
So indeed, what I found was, first of all, it all depends on how you define work performance. Um, and and so to kind of clear up the field, I used a particular framework that one may or may not agree with, but at least it's organizing the field, which was my purpose. And and this particular framework, developed by Koopmans and her colleagues, um, kind of categorizes work performance into four different categories. So there is task performance. So that's something, I don't know, number of papers published or whatever, the quantity and quality of work that's, that's written in your job contract that you should be doing. Then there is contextual performance. So the individual behavior that supports organizational goals, so that you're going to help your colleague, you're going to, there was a coffee machine has run out of beans. You fill in the beans. That's not your job. That's just something you do, right? You may not even want to. Maybe you didn't even wanted to have a cup of coffee. You just saw it. It needed to be done. Then there's adaptive performance. Things change. AI, developed whatever, and then you kind of figure out how to use it and to improve your work. You adapt. And then there's also an aspect of resilience in here, right? And then finally, there is counterproductive work behavior. So that's bullying and misusing privileges. But also in this particular framework, absenteeism and presenteeism, which you may argue are natural responses to feeling unwell. So you don't show up at work, you take a sick leave. But you need to categorize things somehow, and this is where it ended up in this framework.
Yeah.
So to keep this review quite rigorous, and I'm going to have a very long answer to your question. Nothing is simple in research. So I declared in advance in my kind of a pre-registration that the main outcome or the main outcome of interest that I'm looking at is task performance, and that's the quantity and quality of work, because I thought, well, if somebody thinks about work performance, they probably mean that in the back of their mind. And then there are these other things that also are important and influence things. And that just helped me to kind of allocate my kind of statistical resources to be more confident in this one outcome, rather than many, like having a chance of finding good outcomes in many different places and then declaring, oh, we found something. So anyway, And then a third part or whatever, I've lost count of complexity to before I answer to add is when you look at research and you look at randomized controlled trials, that the kind of the gold standard of figuring out if something works. The important question is to ask, works compared with what? So then I also looked at task performance in mindfulness compared to doing nothing at all. And there, yes, we can see an effect, a modest one, small effect even. But we're quite confident in it, in the sense that the research quality is quite poor, but the confidence intervals are quite narrow. So, future trials will end up probably also showing some sort of an effect. There is a small caveat which says that mindfulness programs in certain contexts may perform worse than doing nothing. So they might lower work performance. And compared to doing nothing at all, that's quite a bad thing. But also it could make sense because people were doing their mindfulness course not working, and maybe that's the whole explanation. We don't know. And the second question is, well, mindfulness, as we spoke or talked about, is not the only intervention you could offer, right? You could do something else. And there we don't have that much evidence. I only found 4 studies that looked at that compared mindfulness against, well, with doing something else that should improve task performance. The effect was even smaller, and the confidence intervals were massive. The overall effect was statistically significant, but I would be less confident in that. So there is no, I would say if you really like this other program, you don't have to do mindfulness. Or like there is no reason to pick mindfulness over another one based on my results, at least, or the results we found. And these results are only based on outcomes within 4 weeks of finishing the course, so it's very short term as well.
Yeah. What I find really interesting about all of this, there's nothing here I don't find interesting, but in particular, when you bring up this idea that mindfulness is not the only thing to help improve work performance, and that often what I see is that programs are very general mindfulness, and that may not be the right application of them. And that mindfulness can help build up capacities that can then translate into work effectiveness, an ability to stay focused and on task, for example, may be very helpful in the productivity aspect of things, but other areas may not be helpful at all, and they're just distracting from productivity if that's a particular measure that we're looking at. So I'm curious, Maris, from your perspective in doing this research, and in particular being in this territory of well-being, is what do you want to see happen in the coming years, or what new research would you like to see?
What I really missed doing this particular research, this systematic review, but also doing my trial, was good trials comparing mindfulness with another program. It doesn't have to be in the field of work performance. Just we don't have much information about mindfulness versus doing something else that works. We know that works for well-being. I don't know, exercise or I don't know, other knitting, whatever, and of course, the problem is, or dancing. I like dancing, and it helps my well-being. Non, but obviously, dancing is not for everyone, as running is not for everyone. So it's understanding for whom things work. So we need lots and lots of trials, but also there will be some interventions that are more appropriate when we kind of distribute it to a larger population than others. And we don't really have enough evidence to suggest that mindfulness is that thing. Or in which context we know we should definitely pick mindfulness, and what is the situation where we say, oh, mindfulness might not work. It might work in this other place, but here we should do this other thing, and we don't know what the other thing is. So it would be good to have these head-to-head comparisons in different populations, so we know more about what works for whom, in which conditions.
I agree completely, and especially in those bake-offs, I call them, where you're comparing
Of
two
course.
things, is that it not just be, oh, for mindfulness, we're going to do the same old thing we always do, instead of, well, we're targeting for, let's say, work performance or pro-social behaviors in a workplace or whatever it happens to be, that there are different ways in which we can support that through mindfulness. It's not the
Yes.
exact same thing every time for all conditions we're trying to encourage or discourage from happening.
Yes, quite. Yes. And it's, yeah, you should be very mindful or paying attention to the outcomes that you are expecting. Is it improvement in well-being or reduction in something else? Or is it, yeah, and does it then translate to a work-related outcome? Or is it, or maybe it's not even relevant? You know, in some contexts, it's not important. You just want to make sure people feel better or smile to their colleagues more or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, for those who are watching, I'm going to have a couple of links for you where links are found wherever you are consuming this content. And I want to thank you so much, our guest today, Maris Vainre. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was nice to talk to you.
Thank you so much for being here, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode and the research around bringing mindfulness into workplaces. If you are interested in learning more about that, again, I do have courses on this and host a community for mindfulness professionals who bring mindfulness into workplaces. Do tap that subscribe button if you find this of value to you. It does help others to find this as well. And remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. And I'll see you again soon on Mindfulness Voyage.